I started off doing repairs in studios just by chance. There were a couple of consoles, analog consoles that were sold to some government institution, and they weren't working, and I was asked to go and rectify some stuff, and I did. And I've been doing this quite a while now. It's been like from 95 thereabouts, and those days we had like massive analog consoles in the country. You know, there were companies that had large format analog consoles. So they required regular maintenance and stuff like that. And the recorders were, we've seen both sides of the recording chain, where we had all analog and analog recorders, moving on to the hybrid recorders and stuff like that, and to now where it's pretty much completely all computer based. So yeah, it's kind of, the studio stuff has gone through a path. In the initial years, the kind of investment in studios was kind of massive. A lot of people tried to replicate Hollywood or Western references by getting a lot of really great consoles in the country. There have been SSL, Neve, you know, even Studer. Studer had a fantastic console. T-Series had a really beautiful console. And up to 2000, even in Ramoji Film City, we really had large format consoles. But that, of course, that's, you know, service at that point in time could have been, you know, used to be pretty intensive. You know. Besides regular faults on a console being used in Indian conditions with high levels of humidity and stuff like that, there were a lot of breakdowns in those years, and you'd have things like, you know, automation supplies, automation kind of failing. Also, people were kind of getting to grips with the technology and usage, so there were faults induced by the user, and tropicalization issues also. Rooms weren't, you know, weren't perfect, creating, you know, all kinds of situations with the electronics. So yeah, there was a lot of work for service guys like us in the old days, and I've worked on even, like, you know, from projectors to optical recorders to magnetic in the institutes and stuff like that, and moving on to the analog chain, all the consoles, the dual inline audio consoles, and even 2-inch 24 track recorders, and the Studers and Otari. And, in retrospect, there was a lot of work for service engineers at that point in time, which over the period of time, because the technology improved, or whatever you want to call it, improved, changed. So the job profile for a service guy became more preventive and looking after stuff, you know, on a pretty, I'd say, superficial level, as opposed to being really involved with the older equipment, which needed a lot of maintenance. So yeah, I've set up quite a few, all the big analog consoles in the country, pretty much all, and still continue to maintain them, because a lot of the clients still have them, either on resale or whatever. And well, that's my job. I look after the consoles and the studio electronics. And studios at this point in time are in a state of flux. The large format ones are kind of dying down because it's difficult to maintain overheads and stuff like that. And unless they are within a production house that can sustain that or find that viable, such studios will find it difficult to run. And they have access to, again, hybrid solution things. The analog recorders are pretty much all gone. And now we have digital consoles, and digital consoles running you know, popular DAW solutions on computers. And yes, there are expensive studios with expensive monitoring and great acoustics and all that stuff, but I think the trend is now to be simplistic, in the sense people are veering towards digital solutions, be it in the processing chain or extensively using DSP and stuff like that for the recording. And you'd find most studio investments lying with you know, high quality microphones, or maybe a couple of outboard pieces of outboard gear, as opposed to buying a large format console. Not only do they weigh like 500, 600 kgs or maybe more, I've even moved a console which is like a ton into studio. But now it's kind of a hybrid solution where they have a controller and they have a DAW, and or they have the last of the analog consoles, but all DAWs. And that's the current trend in the studio industry. I think it's kind of, they're finding like a middle ground where there's a prospect of maybe in the future, analog stuff is coming back, more like boutique solutions, but I don't see them as very cheap solutions for the future. They're going to be expensive. The simulation of analog gear in the digital domain, and that's that kind of stuff that's happening. I see the studios nowadays being run by people who are essentially more operator based, because they could be computer savvy, and I'm not too convinced about their hands-on ability with audio processing, other than the fact that they are very, very good with like manning a DAW and stuff like that. And in the Indian industry, you have to be fast, so that's considered a big trait for an Indian engineer. But yeah, there are positives also from that point of view, because one tends to save time and stuff like that when they're recording. And I think the direction in which they're going is eventually will be, hopefully, at least for us people listening, will be quality as well as quality will be maintained as well. Looking at quality as well as technology, and making make them work in perfect balance. I think that's the future. My idea, after working in studios for many years, has always been to be to have a pristine audio recording path. And this was an idea I've always had. It's difficult to implement well in those days, because the solutions were kind of being developed at that point in time, and was always to have, if it was, I always thought of a console-less kind of design, where people had the ability to choose between the preamp and processing paths, and go directly, for example, go directly to the recording medium. If it happened to be analog, yes, the ideal path would have been to have a mic preamplifier with its basic controls and fundamental EQ, for example, going directly into a 2-inch 24-track machine and having that pristine quality, and moving on. Console-less design, because consoles are expensive. You look at HUI control surfaces offering you the ergonomics of using a fader, but in the simplest terms, and this everybody knows, because everybody's online and using these Raven touch screens and all that stuff, which is great. Console-less design is basically keeping the control of the audio digital, and just having a pure path from the microphone or the recording signal to the recorder. Highest quality D to A converters, and correspondingly A to D converters and D to A pairs, and the best quality. The most you can spend on a computer, get a really robust computer, and spend on the fundamental cogs in that recording chain. An excellent microphone, and even if you do not have an excellent room, eventually move to getting a relatively a nice room. Keeping treatment at a minimum and an affordable cost would be minimizing the amount of room influence that you have in a recording. There are solutions again available for that. So when you take care of the fundamental path, the parts in the recording chain, then we can hope to get a relatively good signal in terms of integrity on a recorder. The more the cogs you introduce, like for example, a badly maintained analog console, for example, is as good as no console at all, in my opinion, because sometimes switch noise or bad ports or bad parts in the console, in the hope of fattening the signal, doesn't work. They could be, you could be inducing a whole lot of other problems, which you'd never know over a period of time, because you're used to your old console, which may have not been recapped or something for like decades, and you really don't know what it is, but that's your reference, and so you live with it. So even if you look at the perfect mic preamplifier, would be something that's absolutely close to the microphone, keeping that signal extremely pure, and having a remote controlled like an RIO microphone, where your gain and everything can be controlled possibly by MIDI or by some digital medium, keeping the microphone and its process close to the source, and having all these control paths close to the engineer, so he can tweak and whatever. But however, the signal still flows directly from the microphone to a recorder, and this has been replicated by many people eventually, and it is kind of like, let's put it this way, it's a pristine path. And for all of us who don't have the kind of budgets at home to do a good recording, I would almost and state the obvious, but it's necessary to state for people who might not know, is to always have great stuff at critical positions in the recording chain. Like for example, the best quality microphone you can afford. Always concentrate on connectivity, really good quality cable and stuff like that, because there's a hell of a loss if you use bad cables, for example. And now all this stuff is available in India. Okay, you can get a really great microphone. Use a pop filter. Use your common sense. Use when you go online, don't just look at the best rate you can get for a product. Look at how you can use the product optimally. So you have a great microphone, yes. Learn how to use the patterns on the microphone. Experiment with that. Make sure the connectivity is good. Make sure your sound card is the best you can afford, because the fundamental conversion, analog to digital conversion, in that stage, you can have a lot of colorization in a path, which could negate the qualities of the earlier component, which is a microphone. So you have to, a common sense, kind of make sure your system is stable. Try not to use too many cracks. That's a good one. Yeah, all of us stay at home. We have our setups at home, and the rooms are not perfect. There could be beds, which could, in a way, have good effects on the sound, like curtains and stuff like that, work as absorbers and stuff like that. But it's a very chance. It can be by chance. It's not by computation that your house is the way it is. It is like that. So then what you have to do is, when you're miking stuff, you have to, besides experimenting in the room, please do a sweep test and take the microphone to different zones and find the best spot to record your guitar, for example. I found an excellent spot in my bathroom. I use that a lot. Stuff in my bathroom sounds excellent for guitar. The reverb, there's a controllable reverb. In my case, there's a shower stall window, and I can open and close that window, and I use that as a reflector. It's not apparent on a phone, but if you use a microphone, it is. So small things like that, and you try to minimize the faults in the room. Some rooms could be irregularly shaped, which could work excellent. Some could be absolutely rectangular or square-like and create all kinds of reflections. So you have to minimize that. And buy a decent pair of monitors. This debate about monitors and stuff being transparent is a very kind of open to interpretation kind of point. Anything that does not have any emphasis on any part of the frequency, if you have the ability to measure or calibrate your monitors, it's not as easy as it seems, because eventually I would suggest that if you know a pal with a calibration microphone, which is a specific kind of microphone, which has characteristics that are needed to do transparent calibration, then yes, you can call them over. If you don't have the budgets, give them a meal. I know a couple of friends. I don't think they'll do it for a meal, but whatever. Yeah, calibration microphone, and scope your room out. And within your means, you can make small changes and focus on this fundamental stuff. The fundamental stuff will eventually be then marked in your mind, in your memory, or even physically as those spots to get a decent recording in your home. Yeah, try not to use headphones too much. It induces fatigue, as you very well know. And all this stuff, actually, a lot of kids who do recording nowadays are extremely aware of all this. They have, they've gone on to use synthesizers and analog gear, and they do reasonably good recordings at home. But this is for people who want to start out and are in a quandary of how much to spend and where to spend and whatever. It's not how much you spend, it's whether you can optimize each component of your expenditure, right? You get a good microphone. In the old days, it would just be an SM58 or something at home, and now you suddenly find, companies like Studio Projects or company like Aston, And then there's, of course, things like the expensive mics like Royers and Neumanns and Sennheisers and all the esoteric brands are expensive. So you look at in your budget, scope the market for the best. So also look for a dealer who can support you in the future, right? By the right kind of information about future products or even service options. That's very important when you're buying stuff. Whoever you buy it from, just make sure that is available to you, and try to keep your gear clean, and don't call people like me over. So I don't need to come over unless. With the current situation with the studio engineers is that we don't have a hell of a lot of work repairing home setups. Like for example, there's nothing that people have at home that is like serviceable other than the sound card. And computers, all the kids assemble their own computers, so they're excellent at that. So even if you're using cheap gear and you're able to you have a budget only for X amount, focus on the fundamentals. If you're a guitar player, for example, I am a guitar player, so focus on getting a good sound, and then sweep the sound with a microphone. Try to get the best sound you can from that guitar at that point in time on your recording setup, and try to optimize that and hear it back, and hope that helps.